I've become closer to the older woman living next to the entrance than with my wife, with whom I share a room. I'm a man who's been married for 3 years, thankfully, due to the support of our capable parents. We were able to start our newlywed life in a 4-room apartment in the city. I'm a teacher and my wife helps with the business her father runs. Our parents own a 1-room building in the countryside and live off the monthly rent. They also have a fairly large field in the countryside where they grow crops for their own consumption and use the remaining land to grow sweet potatoes. My wife and I met at a school and started dating. My wife quit her teaching job, saying it didn't suit her. So her father, who runs a barbecue restaurant, told her he would pass on the business to her if she learned how to operate it, so she's learning now. So these days my wife works late at her father's restaurant. I feel sorry for my always tired wife, but I'm proud of her for learning the business know-how and working positively, saying, I'm willing to struggle this much, since the housework isn't much, with the robotic vacuum cleaner doing the cleaning and the side dishes from my father-in-law's restaurant. And I get off work earlier than most workers. I tidy up the house or buy groceries on my way home and store them in the refrigerator. We're in our late 20s. We got married early, own a house, and have nothing to envy. When we feel the need to have a child later, we've promised to have a child. One day, a single teacher in her 40s who works at the same school came to me. She lost all her money investing in Bitcoin and even got into debt. She wanted to take out the deposit of the house to solve the minus bank account. I told my wife about her desperate situation, and my kind wife suggested that the teacher stay in the room we had prepared as a guest room for a while. I was touched by my wife's generosity, so the teacher started living in our house. We wanted to let her stay for free, but it could hurt her pride, so we decided to charge her rent. The teacher often got off work with me. She took care of dinner and cleaning the shared bathroom, saying she wanted to do what she could at home. The teacher was good at cooking and was quite neat because she had lived alone for a long time. My wife was against the teacher doing the kitchen work, but she had a talent for cooking, so she even learned cooking secrets from the teacher on weekends. My wife, who was about 20 years younger than the teacher, lived without any suspicion. However, I ended up having a heated relationship with the teacher while we were living together. This was possible because my wife always came home late. She would finish the restaurant's accounts and come home around 1 a.m. each day. The incident with the teacher happened by chance. After we came home from work together one day, the teacher, who was the head of the 2nd grade, cooked dinner and said she was tired and would take a shower first. I went out to throw away the trash and took a walk around the neighborhood. When I came home, the teacher was coming out of the bathroom. Coincidentally, she was drying her hair with a towel, and I saw her beautiful figure. I quickly turned my head in embarrassment, but I had seen everything in an instant. The teacher ran into her room in surprise and came out to the living room dressed a little later. I thought such incidents could happen when living in the same house. The teacher was embarrassed to be caught in such a state, but she coolly asked me to forget about it. I said okay and went to bed, but I couldn't fall asleep easily. The teacher took good care of herself for her age. My relationship with my wife had been sporadic lately, and I couldn't stop thinking about the teacher. After tossing and turning for a while, I quietly opened the door and left. Light was leaking from the room the teacher was using. I slightly opened the door and peeked inside. The teacher was watching a movie on her phone, I knocked lightly and said I wanted to have a beer with the teacher. The teacher said okay and came out to the living room. We continued our conversation over beer, potato chips, and nachos. For the first time since she came to this house, I asked the teacher to tell me about her youth. The teacher said she had a boyfriend in college. She innocently believed that she would marry her boyfriend and gave him her pure love. After dating for 2 years, she lost her boyfriend to a junior at school. She said she couldn't trust men because of the shock. 20 years have passed since she focused on her teaching job, and now she feels it's too late to meet a man. I told her that's not true and that she's still beautiful and attractive. The teacher looked into my eyes and asked if I really thought so, and asked if I could be her partner for the night. I went to the teacher's room and we made love. The teacher said she hadn't been in a man's arms for over 20 years, and that it felt like her lost senses were coming back to life. I realized that I get along well with older women. It's commonly said that women's desires increase around menopause, and the teacher was exactly like that. Since then, I spent enjoyable times with the teacher whenever I had the chance. However, no one in the school knew we were living in the same house. This was because rumors in a tight-knit community like a school could get out of hand. The other teachers thought we were carpooling because we lived in the same neighborhood. My wife would come home late, exhausted, and we would have sex out of obligation, but more often than not, she would refuse. One weekend, my wife asked me to help at the restaurant because they had a large group of customers. I spent the entire day serving and working at the counter, and when I got home, the teacher had gone out for a commitment of her own. We waited for the weekdays when we could be alone, living a secretive life with 2 women in the same house. I was tormented by guilt every day, but I couldn't end my relationship with the teacher. One day, my wife came home early without a word. That day, we were sitting side by side watching tea after dinner. I had my arm around the teacher's shoulder, but when I heard the door lock open, I quickly sat upright. My wife seemed clueless, but that was my wishful thinking. In reality, my wife knew everything about us. She had read the diary the teacher had written on her tablet, which only the teacher and I didn't know about. My wife happened to see the tablet on a weekday morning when we were at work. The tablet was turned on, and there was no password, so she naturally saw it. The teacher had written that she had a crush on me and that on the first day we made love. She deliberately came out to the living room and waited for the front door to open. My wife was uncontrollably angry, and I begged her for forgiveness. But she wouldn't forgive me, and we ended up getting divorced. My wife criticized me for my lack of ethical consciousness as a teacher, and I couldn't stop her from reporting our relationship to the school. So I changed the ownership of the house to my wife. I also closed the bank account in my name and gave it to my wife. I left with nothing but a car. We had no choice but to pack and leave. The teacher was distraught that our relationship was exposed because of her mistake, and I admitted that I had had a hard time with my wife in many ways. The teacher found a small monthly rental room, and I'm living in a lease house with the help of my parents. Although our relationship ended due to the teacher's plan, I realized that people always pay for their mistakes. I spent my entire 20s with my wife, but she refuses to see me even if I go to her. Reflecting on my mistake of satisfying my desire by ignoring my wife in my house, I think it's only polite to my wife to live without a woman for a while.